Hi, I'm Dallas Dickinson. I'm the CEO of QC Games, and we've just released in early access the game Breach.
So talk about, for people who don't know, what Breach is all about.
Boy, so Breach is, at its heart, it's a co-op action RPG. It has a 4v1 element, so there's a kind of fun asymmetric gameplay. But what you're doing as a hero is you're fighting through a dungeon. It's sort of short session, 15-minute dungeons, but you're up against not just the dungeon itself, but also this other entity called a Veil Demon, kind of like a dungeon master. So every time you play one of these dungeons, it plays differently, depending on who you're up against, what kind of Veil Demon they are, what tactics they use, and the composition of your team. So the idea is to jump in, play these quick sort of short session games, defeat a boss, get really sweet loot, level up, and kind of customize your class in a whole bunch of different ways. But you can do the same thing as a Veil Demon. So some players play entirely as Veil Demons, some players play entirely as heroes. It's just your style. Do you want to be the hero, or do you want to be the villain?
Talk about some of the classes. You guys have multiple classes in the game: healers, DPS, tanks, all that good stuff.
Absolutely. So we take inspiration from many, many different genres. Again, many of us have worked on action RPGs or co-op online RPGs, but we take inspiration from many other genres. So you'll see healers, but you'll also see like a juggling aerial combat freeform sort of like tank class, something almost out of Devil May Cry. So the game currently has, oh boy, we've changed it because we've already added several. We started with 24 classes. I think we're up to 26, maybe our 27th is coming out next week. So there are 18 of them, 19 of them are on the hero side. 20 of them are on the hero side. We changed. Since we came out, we've dropped another one like at least once a month, and we can continue doing that. But the thing is, there are not just these 27 classes. You can cross-pollinate and create your own custom class. So when I say that there were 18, now 20 hero classes, there are actually something like 5,000 that you can build yourself by swapping abilities in and out. And all of them have sort of like different counterplay, different elements. Same is true on the Veil Demon side. We started with 6, we've added a 7th. Now there are, again, something like 4,000, 5,000, math is hard, but it's a whole lot of classes that you can build out of this, and therefore you don't know who you're up against, and when you find out, you have to do all sorts of tactical counterplay.
Yeah, we've seen some companies give a shot at their 4v1, 3v1. I mean, Fable did they're very similar to that. They had a dungeon master and you run through a gauntlet, and then Evolve, of course, tried their 4v1 combat. So what kind of inspiration did you have? What are some of the challenges when you're making that dynamic to make it balanced and fun for both sides?
Absolutely, it is one of the big challenges. I think we've taken a lot of positive inspiration, because I think people have said with those games like, oh, maybe 4v1 can't be done, but we've seen great other games out there, Dead by Daylight being a prime example of figuring out a way to do that. Our game sort of relies on progression and that deep counterplay that I was kind of implying with the ways that you customize your class. So our ideal scenario is one where it's a 50-50, that the Veil Demons win half the time, the heroes win half the time. We've sort of fluctuated between 45 and 55 in both directions, but it is a challenge to balancing a game like that. What we're actually finding, and this is part of the reason we're in early access, is to kind of figure this stuff out, is that the high skill cap players, it actually breaks perfectly. The lower or entry-level players, the first time you play, it tends to be heroes getting their butts kicked a little bit. So we're working on the tuning of that in order to get like the proper matchmaking that gets you in the right sort of like skill tier.
You guys recently, I think you probably announced more, but you guys had the Pyromancer, something you guys introduced fairly recently. Yes. Talk a little bit about that class.
Yeah, so the Pyromancer was our first sort of post-initial release game class. It's a glass cannon. It is a fire-based ranged mage character, and the way you kind of get out all of your damage is by putting stacks of fire on people, by combusting the fire so it spreads to other people, by consuming all of the stacks of fire onto whatever target that you're attacking. So it truly is a find a target and burn them down, literally in this case. But we also released another hero class called the Medic, because we wanted to actually get some more healing options, and each school of magic, this is getting a little bit deep here, but there's sort of the double gun school of magic where we have a gunslinger, we have a sniper, we have an engineer. They got a heal class when we brought in the Medic, so they do sort of like kind of techno cryobot kind of, I guess there's another term for it that we use in the game, but whatever, that allows them to have a healer within their stack, whereas the Pyromancer was part of the arcane school of magic, where we actually had our sort of standard arcane mender, which is what you would expect, a dude with a wand who's healing you from a distance. But now you can kind of customize a class within that school of magic, pulling some from the Pyromancer, some from the Mender, to make kind of a hybrid.
Talk about this world you've crafted, because the art design and the world are very unique. You've kind of crossed like modern tech with like with fantasy, and they've kind of mended together.
Yeah, the way we describe it is modern meets mythological. So the very, very short version of our sort of background history and lore, of which there's actually a whole bunch of story stuff we haven't put into the game yet, interesting motion comics that explain all of this. But the idea is that 70,000 years ago, Earth actually had all of the mythologies present. It was ripped into two, and so for 70,000 years there has been this mythological Earth evolving at the same time as our regular Earth was just here. They are being smashed together, and so it feels like an invasion of all of these different mythologies from all around Earth. So when you're in the Egyptian area, we have a couple of levels that are around Egyptian sort of like landmarks. You're fighting against Sekhmet and Horus and Bastet and all of these Egyptian gods and goddesses. When you go to Asia, we have a Tokyo map. You're fighting against things from Asian mythology. So like the boss at the end of that is this big forest oni, like a sort of a Japanese troll. But we also have some Eastern European ones. And so we're drawing from all of these different mythologies in this sort of modern setting.
How does early access through Steam help you develop your game further and communicate with fans of the game?
Yeah, so I mean, the idea is sort of to have a walled garden, to have kind of a smaller population that we can try things out, that we can test. Because as I said, we take inspiration from so many different games, even different genres, that there is really no other game like ours out there. And that's sort of a double-edged sword. Some of it is like, oh wow, this is new and it's different. Some of it is like, we don't actually know how players are going to interact with certain aspects of the game. We don't know how players are going to engage in this type of gameplay or this type of progression until we test it on a smaller audience. And so it's really helping us kind of focus and hone the experience before we go fully free to play, which we actually are going to do relatively soon, where we kind of allow everyone into the game, but we kind of need to tune it up a little bit before we go there.
You guys playing, right now you're PC only in early access. Are you playing Nintendo Switch, Xbox, PS4? I
cannot say specifically what or when that is happening, but yes, this is a game that is designed from the ground up to be a cross-platform, sort of cross-console, PC, etc. type of game.
You guys eventually have controller support for the Steam Early Access title.
So we already do. You can play the game with controller support. It's not full controller support, so like some of the menus before you get into a match, you have to use mouse and keyboard. But once you're in the game, all of the gameplay is fully controller supported. So you can play, you can fight entirely on a controller.
Where can people find more information about your game?
Come to playbreach.com. That's sort of the hub of it all, but you can follow us on all of the socials, and luckily I think it is Playbreach on all of the socials, the Twitters and the Instagrams and the Facebooks and all of those things.
And do you have a release date yet?
We don't have an official release date for free-to-play, but it is likely soon, TM, in the next couple months.